Evolution in Divine Love is an invitation to reimagine everything from the place where it all begins and where it all returns. Love.
Hey, welcome. In a spirit that honors the very message of evolution in divine love, today we are launching this new podcast series known as EDL Podcast, or Evolution in Divine Love. This series will run from July through December, and it will remain on our Tadatme Sangha YouTube channel for your convenience. In each episode, we'll be further churning and evolving the key themes that are presented within the book. We'll progress sequentially through the book so you can follow along if that's something that you would like to do. Each episode will open with a conversation with Swami Padmanabha. Then the hosts will invite special guests to join in, and their presence and their unique insights will help to deepen and evolve the conversation. So today we're introducing the podcast, and we have the special opportunity to sit down and chat with Swami Padmanabha about writing his third book, how that relates to his first two books, as well as touching the content of the introduction chapter of Evolution in Divine Love. So today, your hosts are John Stuperitz, Sweta Dweep Radhika, and myself, Bhakti Rasa. Maharaj, how does it feel now for your third, let's say, your third birth of a book into the world?
I have triplets now.
Yes, triplets.
Yeah, a few days ago, this in advance copy came. So we took a picture today, shared a post the day we are recording this first episode. And yes, I think when I wrote the second book, this idea came of, okay, as a Swami, I don't have biological children, but there's still a way of procreation, right? As I always like to think, everyone has sexual energy. Sex is not just a biological act, but it's an energy that needs to be expressed somehow. And sexuality is all about, ideally, intimacy, connection, and creativity. So as a monk, I need to know what to do with that energy also, how to express it and channel it. So for me, writing is a big part of it in terms of creativity and connection and intimacy with thoughts, with other people. And again, as an expression of the sexual energy, maybe the procreation, the invitation of a new soul to manifest. In one way, I was at some point naturally that idea came. Okay, a book may be the parallel version of that for me as a celibate monk. So it feels nice. It feels like with any pregnancy, there is labor work, there is the pre-conception, the act itself of writing it, what comes after the book comes, the baby comes, and the baby has a life of its own. So you think you already know what the book is about, and after the book is published and people starts to read it and share their thoughts, you start to realize that, yeah, the conversation is way bigger than what you thought. In the same way as a parent having a child, you think, okay, this is my baby, but eventually you start to actually know the person. And again, as the theme of this book speaks about, it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing journey. You never end discovering that. So yeah, it's a journey of wonder.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it kind of points to what I've seen in your books also, where one book seems to rise out of the other, where there's just a natural overflow, and where one picks up where the last one left off, just kind of a furthering of the content.
They're related siblings.
Yeah, they're related, and in a way where there's a kind of a refinement of what what came before. So it's
Mm,
progressive and in itself speaks to the pattern of evolution, where it's a deepening and a refining of a particular concept.
yeah. Yeah, in one sense, they are not strictly triplets, as I say before, because triplets, they are all born at the same time, right? But as John said, they're related siblings in the sense that, yeah, one comes after the other, and that's the only way writing works for me, right? I cannot just write about the book that someone like contracts me to write about this particular theme, but it has to be something that is not only relevant for me and relatable enough, but like a natural continuation of what I've been writing about in the past, like a natural overflowing of the previous chapter of the journey, so to say. And in that sense, there are different books, but in one sense, it's only one book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I write about that in the introductions to my book so far. I was laughing the other day because I thought, okay, in my second book, I wrote how the second book is connected to my first book. And now in the third book, I wrote how the first two books were connected with each other, now connected to the third book. And as some of you know, I almost finished writing a fourth book, which of course is still not published. And I already wrote the introduction, and somehow I clarify how that fourth book is connected to the previous one. So I was chuckling about point like, okay, if I write 25 books, my introduction will get longer and longer because I need to explain how the 24 previous books were connected with each other. At some point, I have to stop clarifying that. So I think probably with my first 4 books, I make that case clear enough that, yeah, that's how it works for me. I'm not saying that it should work like that for everyone, but it works for me, and it's beautiful for me to witness that cohesiveness and coherence and connection between one theme and the other. And as you point back to Rasa, it's quite connected to the theme of this particular book, which is evolution in divine love. And as I mentioned in my second book, Radical Personalism, this is an ongoing conversation. So I will never dare to consider any of my books a final word on anything, but just a moment that I'm taking to ponder into some particular theme, hopefully open or give ourselves permission to engage in conversation about that, which is, again, ongoing, ever evolving.
Yeah, that brings me to another thing that I've noticed about your books. And we'll just talk about this before, we get into the content actually of what the introduction says. But for me, it seems that your books are very timely, as if they're a response to like a collective necessity. And
Timely, right?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
I heard tiny, and I was like, they're
Oh,
not so
sorry.
tiny. People complain
No, not
sometimes about the size. Okay,
not
timely.
technically. No, timely. I'm glad you clarified that.
Okay, thank you.
And why I say that, not only do I see it within my own life, but I see it globally also. I hear it from people around the world who write to you, who comment on your videos, who comment on different posts, where, especially radical personalism, where they've been waiting for this message for so long.
I was one of those people.
Yeah, I was one of those people. And we didn't know what the message was. We didn't know what we needed to hear. But as soon as we heard it, that was it. It created such like an instantaneous almost holy shift, where very quickly things aligned and lives changed, and people were healed and were able to see things in a very completely different way. And again, I hear this from people all around the world, which makes me think that they speak to some kind of collective necessity. And I'm wondering if you also have kind of seen that happening, and if you think, and if you do see that, if you feel that evolution in divine love might also be called forth due to the time, due to something that right now in this very moment, collectively, we need to hear this. Like the Christians speak of the good news. To me, your books are the good news. It's like, oh, hope restored, and not just like a false kind of hope, like a cheerleader kind of thing, but a really deep practice of hope, a living hope. So I'm wondering if you see that happening, if you witness that, and then also if you might feel that Evolution and Divine Love, this new book, also holds that for people as a response to a call that might be happening.
So, yeah, in brief, the answer may be yes, but let me unpack. First, you say that the books are timely or feel timely, at least to some people, which again, here we are not claiming, we are not presenting any claims of universal timeliness, that it will be felt timely for every single being. But yeah, I cannot deny that it has felt so for some. And again, it goes back to what I say before, that I personally cannot write about something that I do not feel timely, that I do not feel it's necessary to be written about. Because if someone wrote about something, I won't write the same thing if someone else already did, so to say. So I'm trying to write as a service to the necessity of the moment, so to say. That's how I try to conceive my writing, as of service, right, to the community, to the world, not only as my own personal expression of sexual energy in the form of creativity. It doesn't end there, but also how that takes the form of something that can be relevant and relatable to the current situation in the world, not only of my own Gaudiya Vaishnava community, but beyond that as well. And I'm happy to have heard from people in my community and beyond our community that they have found that timeliness and relatability. So again, it's the only way it works for me. But at the same time, it's something that is my own timely writing, if we want to dare to call it as such, is a byproduct of what I myself received from other teachers and authors, that when I read or hear them, I feel, oh, that's timely for me, right? So I don't want just to isolate myself as the timely prophet who is bringing the final thing, me and only, is anything like that, but just in the same, I'm in my own journey and my own process of needing to connect with timely truths that speak to me in my own particular stage of my journey. So I know what that how it feels when I receive that myself. And naturally, you want to extend that gift to others, right? So again, it doesn't begin with me, it doesn't end with me. It's just one aspect of the whole chain. That's what sometimes we call parampara, right? So how each of us can embody and represent a timely embodied message to the world, to our community, whether you are writing a book or whether you are not writing a book, but just by how you live your life. So that on one side. And okay, you concentrate mostly part of the question in regards to my previous book, Radical Personalism, and how that created a particular impact. And I agree, and it was written in a very particular moment and stage of my life, and naturally that spoke to people's needs and was able to somehow articulate some things and giving people permission to think and speak in certain ways that many of them felt necessary. So do I have the hope that the third book fulfills the same purpose? I hope so. I mean, of course, I'm not expecting the same result, the same impact, because it's never the same. Again, the very book brings that premise. It's never the same. It's an ongoing unfolding of things and reality. But I hope that the content of evolution and divine love can help the readers to have new articulation, new words, new concepts, and to conceive reality and life in what I call a journey language, right? We need a journey language to conceive reality as a journey, as an ongoing unfolding. So that's one of the main intentions of the book, and hopefully all that translates, of course, into concrete, practical reality. I hope this is not just a fancy collection of theory and information, but something that really can be embodied and expressed in life, in relationships, and so on.
Yeah. Yes, I see the unfolding like that, and it's beautiful what you're saying, and it does seem that because of what comes prior, the radical personalism in this, and the focus on the individual and the ongoing process of the self, and all the pillars of radical personalism, that the evolution and divine love, with that center, will unfold in the way that will hit people and reach people as something that is alive, that they can imbibe and turn into something practical within their life, and not leave it in the theoretical realm, which
That's
is
right.
not where it lies.
Because it's, it seemed to me that your first book, Inherent or Inherited, is really a conclusive sort of message about Gaudiya theology, the theory. And then, of course, your next book, Radical Personalism, is so much about praxis. So is there some connection between theory and praxis, and how that manifested as evolution and divine love? Or maybe would you call it something else?
Yeah, of course, I agree with your point, but also I will say that while my first book could be seen as more theoretical, more philosophical, more conceptual, more even scholarly, if some may argue, still a big part of the book is, okay, we have this conclusion on this given topic, whether particular type of love for God is inherent or not in the soul. But then the second part of the book, which in my opinion, in big part is the main point, and I tried to mention that in my introduction, is, okay, but we have some difference of opinions about different teachers, or that seem to contradict themselves. So what to do with that, right? How to enter into those unsettling conversations, how to be okay to deal with apparent contradictions, and how to open ourselves to, again, conversations in which may even end up agreeing to disagree, and how we can, as I like to say, love each other despite disagreements, not only tolerate each other, right? So that has been also an important point for my book, which for me goes beyond the mere philosophical, theoretical aspect, but goes very much into daily life and coexistence. But yeah, I agree there's a big theoretical aspect to it, so to say. And of course, radical personalism has a lot of also conceptual content, philosophical notions, but it also, yes, points and invites to action. It's proactive, as the subtitle of the book says, proaction, action. And so for me, both are always intertwined. So in connection to the third book, praxis and theory are intertwined with one another, because, as we will say in our tradition, Sambandha, Avideya, and then Prayojan, which could be translated Sambandha as theory, Avideya as praxis or practice, and then some Prayojan as the fruit of all of that sequence. So I will argue that it all begins with the right conception, right? It all begins with the right, so to say. I don't want to sound righteous by saying that, but with an accurate conception of reality. And then whatever we call or conceive as a practice is the natural outcome of the conception. That's how I like to see both. So it's not like, okay, theory is theory. It has nothing to do with practice. No, whenever you have a realistic theory in place, that draws you irresistibly to live your life in a certain way. so to say. So that's for me the idea of sambandha. Sambandha means, and I mentioned that in my book, in every one of my books, I go to the term sambandha at one point or another because it's so important for me. Which sambandha sometimes can be loosely translated as theory, but sambandha means everything is connected, everything. Sam is bandha, is bonded. So when you play out the implications of everything existing in relationality, in interconnection, that takes you to a certain way of living your life, right?
Yeah.
So that's my point, how practice and theory should naturally lead to a type of practice or lifestyle. Should not be just, again, a fancy intellectual curiosity and just getting stuck in a conceptual contemplation of things, but there's no embodiment, there's no playing out of the ideas. So for me, it's very important, the two of them, but again, practice is not sufficient without the proper conceptual orientation. So that's why both should be properly emphasized and connected, and that naturally leads to prayojan, or a fruit or a result of that. And that continues to reinforce and continues to expand into an ever evolving spiral, as I try to make the point in the book. Yeah.
That kind of leads to a next question. What I heard is there's kind of two elements there in the first book. There's both what to think and also how to think. And you could maybe apply that also to radical personalism, is so much about how to think, how to feel. Would you say that that exists in this book as well? That there's some theme or idea about how, not on a strictly personal level, but maybe reality as such, how reality sort of thinks and feels and moves.
Mm.
Is that something about this idea of evolution in divine love?
Yeah, I will argue that's the case. I personally do not feel much identify with the notion of what to think in terms of telling people what to think, but just trying to think in a way that inspires people the how to think. And again, even in the how to think, I'm not here to tell people how to think. Each one has their own free will and decides how to think. Not, but I will emphasize, yeah, it's more important to learn how to think than what to think, in the sense that what to think generally related to getting the right dogmas in place, right? Getting the right beliefs, what to think, what to believe in. And I mean, and I'm saved, and I don't need to think further beyond that. I just need to regurgitate, give the proper answer whenever the question comes. And how to think is more like an open question, like an ongoing disclosure. So yeah, I hope with this book, Evolution and Divine Love, we can open a further chapter of continuing to approach all these realities, love, the divine, us as souls, even material energy, with renewed eyes, renewed language, renewed perspectives, and never tired of engaging in that exercise, right? Never reaching that stiffening, stagnant point of absolute conclusiveness, even in terms of which words to use to depict something that you ultimately, as I try to show in my book, is ever evolving. So if something is ever evolving, how much we can put a final word to it. So that's why I say this book is not a final word. Actually, it's the exact opposite of that. It's the opening to the reality that there is not a final word. That's basically how the book concludes. We are in our first episode here. I'm jumping into the very last line of the book, basically, and that's how I conclude the book, that the reality remains in ongoing perpetual evolution. And let me read it literally. I have it here. I'd say, yeah, this work does not claim to be the final word on any matter. One who reads it attentively will realize that the ultimate conclusion is this: there is no final word, for evolution itself is perpetually falling in love, evolution in divine love, and that is our final word, right? So.
Okay, so now let's turn to the content of the book and the words that are in there. You have a open it up.
It seems like what you read is, that's kind of what you want to deliver to the audience of this book, to the readers of this book. And I'm wondering, this idea of evolution, if we can talk about it a little bit. So, and I know Sweta Dweep has some specific questions too about the term that you coin early in the introduction about deep evolution.
Okay,
So,
bring those to the way, please.
Yes, Maharaj. You said a sacred dance of deep evolution. So you link deep evolution to sacred dance. So I was wondering, like, how can we understand that deep evolution is a sacred dance? Why do you call it a dance, a sacred dance?
Well, in brief, because both the notion of evolution and dance imply movement, right? So something that is moving is never in the same place. So it's moving towards something, but so that's to be the most basic reply will be that. Both evolution, something that is evolving, is unfolding, is expanding, and a dance is something that indicates movement. Of course, I refer to that as a sacred dance, so sacred movement. And of course, in our particular tradition, and not only in ours, but for us, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, one of the final symbols, if we want to refer to that as a symbol in more archetypal terms of love's expression, is we will refer to as the Rasa Lila, right? Or the Rasa dance, sometimes called the circular dance, or the sweet absolute Sri Krishna is dancing with his intimate romantic devotees, lover, the gopis, and there is harmony, and there is music, and there is celebration of reality, and it's a dance that is constantly reaching new heights of depth. In fact, the main narration we know in our tradition about the Rasa Lila, since there are many of these sacred dances, is one in which Krishna starts the Rasa dance, as we know, by playing the flute, calling the gopis, and they start eventually to dance. But before that, there's a back and forth. There's lots of complexity that needs to be integrated. Krishna asking them why you came, you return home. There's a back and forth. They start to celebrate, and at one point, Krishna disappears from the dance, right? And the gopis start to long in separation for him, look for him, sing their hearts out in separation. Eventually, he reappears, and the dance reaches a new level of celebration. So the Rasa dance started, and it was a Rasa Lila, sacred dance. But we will argue in our tradition that at that point, the sweet absolute felt this can reach a further level yet. So for this to happen, certain things have to happen. So he disappears and all these other things, and eventually a new level of sacred dance. And of course, the next Rasa dance will be a new level of sacred dance, and so on and so forth. So yeah, this notion of circular dance is, again, it's present in our tradition, but it's so present in other traditions as well. I remember when I read a book by Richard Rohr, and he has a book on the Christian Trinity called the Sacred Dance.
Dance.
The Divine Dance.
Divine
Thank
dance.
you. The Divine Dance. So there he refers to this Greek term perichoresis, which basically it's the term from which the word choreography comes. But actually, perichoresis is a term that was originally used to refer to the Trinity, to the Christian notion of God as one and three at the same time. And that refers to divine dance, like to a circular dance, he will say. So of course, you can imagine me reading that, and I cannot avoid making my my Gaudiya connection with that. And it's like, okay, we have our own perichoris, our circular dance. So that's how love operates. That's my point. At its most intimate levels is a constant dance of reciprocation. And it's circular, but not in a way we will say circular thinking. No, like you're thinking in circles and it's always the same thing over and over again. But I like to give the notion of the spiral, right? Which is a circular movement. Circular means also completeness. But it's always spiral, it's expanding, reaching new levels of completion. So yeah, for me, the notion of sacred dance has to do with all this and a few other things as well, but let's keep it there.
Wow.
So, Maharaj, you're painting out this picture of course, Krishna Lila and the Rasa Lila being maybe what we would call the highest Lila. And it makes me wonder about this idea, are scriptures ever complete? And what's the relationship between living scripture and living tradition? Because, of course, you make the point elsewhere that scripture was originally a personal revelation by a rishi, by a seer of the truth, and of course, in the very beginning of the introduction, you use the words revelation. You had two revelations that kind of formed into a realization. So can you speak something to these ideas of living scripture, access to personal revelation, and how that builds on or evolves a tradition?
Okay. So of course, here we are entering into some of the main subjects of the introduction of my book, right? One of them was, because one of the subsections of the introduction is the sacred dance of deep evolution. And now you're asking me about tradition. And there's a subsection of the book also called Preserving Tradition by Breaking New Ground, right? So where I try to describe tradition as living. So you asked if there is anything like complete tradition or complete scripture. Somehow we are connecting scripture with tradition and revelation. Of course, we could say yes, but the point is, what do we understand by complete? Again, and that's a point I try to address in the second chapter of my book, through the word perfection, which somehow is tied to the idea of completion. That sometimes people will say, okay, but God is complete. And we will talk about that whenever we reach that chapter in our episodes. But God is complete. So how can you say that he's evolving? That will indicate that he was not complete before the evolving point, before he became more. But of course, we are saying God is complete, but on the foundation of completeness, he can continue to expand his experience of completion. That's what our tradition teaches. No, God is described sometimes as Purna, Purnatara, Purnatama, complete, more complete, most complete. Of course, these are all words, so it's difficult to just capture such a reality through words. But we can say that there is a completion to genuine revelation. I mean, I'm not only limiting that to our own Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, but to other genuine wisdom schools. We can find the absolute, the infinite revealing himself, herself, themselves, however we may like to conceive the absolute. And different sages, different personalities throughout history and culture will get particular revelations of that ultimate reality, which is eternal. Again, the fact that something manifests in the heart of a sage doesn't mean that it started to exist at that moment. So that's something important to clarify, that in different traditions we may have saints or sages, however you may like to call them, that they will download, so to say, certain particular I wouldn't call information in this case, but it's more than that. There has to be transformation involved. That becomes some sort of revelation. So yeah, I will argue, I mentioned that concept in my book, updatable scripture, not to say that the ancient wisdom became obsolete or that there are no eternal truths, but the nature of something eternal is that it's ever evolving. So you can always say something more about it. And I try to refer to, in trying to make that case, I try to refer to my own tradition to support that claim, quoting, I don't know, the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita, where Sanjay is saying, whenever I recall this conversation again and again, I become full of wonder and awe, like implying it's ever fresh, it's ever new. It's not that it's becomes stale. Or the same with the Srimad Bhagavatam in the beginning, it's speaking about it's an invitation to relish the content of this revelation, even beyond liberation for eternity. And many other quotes. I won't torture you all and the audience with one quote after another, but there are so many examples in our and other traditions that scripture is something living. Again, our principle of parampara, or sometimes called disciplic succession, guru-disciple transmission, is basically that every single member of this chain can contribute with their own revelations, with their own insights. Now, one of our teachers, Srila Prabhupada, will say that the duty of a student is to, if at all that person writes something, that person should write something that is not the same thing that was written by the previous teachers, but should write something new that adds, that contributes, that ornaments previous contributions. And there's always something new to say, not only in terms of adjusting the language for the zeitgeist that one is speaking to for the times and place, also that, but also because there's always something new to realize regarding about an ever-evolving infinite reality. So there's no end to how many sacred scriptures can manifest in time, though each tradition may have their foundational texts. You have the Quran, you have the Bible, you have the Torah, you have the Bhagavatam, Gita, whatever. Again, those in themselves are ever evolving. Again, you can read them over and over again, and you will find something new, not only because you are ideally evolving, but also because the nature of the content of the revelations is ever evolving. Wow. And as a result of that interaction, probably many will feel inspired to put that into words in forms of new books, which somehow ideally will be basically extensions of those quote unquote original revelations, right? So that's how we are invited to conceive tradition and scripture as something living, honoring the past. Now, it's not that we are denying that, honoring original foundational scriptures, and because we do so, new revelations, new realizations, new scriptures will come as a result of that, by the grace of that revelation.
Maharaj, I actually like another thing you mentioned in the same section. You refer this to the example of sedimentation, like the new layers form on the older layers. So it reminds me of this rainbow mountain, like all the different colors. So it's so beautiful, like how they all like build on top of each other. And yeah, like what you were saying, not just preserving the scriptures, like I think you used the word like stagnation, like trying to keep it all the same.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me of the sedimentation notion. And again, all the new layers can only be there because of the previous layers that are sustaining them. So you cannot, without the previous layers, there's no way of having the new layers. So you're honoring those. And an important point also in this connection that you mentioned, the word preservation, is that preservation can only happen by growth. You cannot maintain something always in the same exact place, right? I think that's a very important aspect. Now we are Vaishnavas in our tradition. So Vaishnavas are related to the notion of Vishnu. Vishnu means the maintainer, the all pervader, but it's generally identified with the concept of maintenance. So, but you can only maintain something by making it grow and develop. So that's an important aspect here. So preservation can only happen by ongoing evolution and development. That's the only way. So I think that's an important point. How to preserve a tradition doesn't mean by making it different, by keeping it always the same, but by ongoingly developing.
What I'm hearing you say, Maharaj, is a sort of call to participation. I believe you used that word in the introduction, that this evolutionary process, what you call deep evolution, should be participatory. In fact, it is participatory. We can't just sit outside of the circular dance or just look at scripture from a written in stone, but actually the individual and the collective naturally are participating in the further development of God, of love, of matter, and of themselves.
I agree. I agree, and I appreciate your mentioning the word participation, because again, reality is, as we say before, sambandha, right? So everything is interconnected, interrelated, which is another way of saying everything is participating with everyone else, with everything else. There is a co-existence, a co-participation of everything in reality with a common center. So the very nature, ontological nature of reality is participatory. So if in my book I'm throwing an invitation to participate, it's just an invitation to become aware of what's already taking place, right? So there is a constant dialogue and participation. The question is, of course, the main problem as it has been depicted in our school is, and a good way of putting it is our lack of participation or our lack of awareness that we already belong, that we already participate. No? Participation could be another word for belonging, right? So everything belongs, as Ritaro will say. So everything is already participating, but many times we do not feel a part of that, but we feel apart from that, right? So participate is the opposite of feeling apart, right? So, and we are already part of the divine. And Krishna in the Gita says, Mama banso jivalu ki jiva bhutta sanada, and the soul is a part of me. No, I mean, we are part of the divine reality, but many times we don't feel that. So we have to gain an awareness of how we already belong, of how we already participate, of how everything, not only us, everything and everyone is already a part of an wholesome, integrated reality. That's what the ancient Upanishads try to say. With the famous mantra, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Famous mantra that says the word Purnam over and over again. And Purna means whole, complete. So it says, this is whole, that is whole. That is whole also, right? God is whole, the world is, everything is whole and complete. So of course the question that comes after that verse is, why do I do not see that completeness? Why do I do not feel that belongingness? And that's what spiritual practice is for, right? Like live your life in a way that you become aware that you and everything already belongs and is participating. So yeah, hopefully I hope that this particular offering can be one more contribution into that conversation, how to increase our awareness of belongingness and therefore participation in reality.
What do you see as some of the obstacles that get in our way from seeing what is already there? What is the bedrock of reality? What is it that gets in our way of seeing that and embracing it? Of course,
Well,
to answer it, it depends, I would say. But if you have some general,
yeah, what comes immediately is that, of course, we, especially we humans, have become more and more expert at making the obvious difficult to grasp, right? So we have been historically creating more and more divisiveness and sense of tribal thinking, dualistic thinking, us and them thinking, more and more polarizing. We live in a world that is so polarized. It's so easy to feel it apart from each other just by certain particular belief or opinion about one specific subject. You already are on the other side of the river, so to say, right? You belong to the other army, not to mine. Again, the problem depicted in the very first verse of the Bhagavad Gita, the Kuru Pandava dichotomy, the us and them, dualistic thinking, that again has been very, in a very sophisticated way, we continue to refine that problem to our own peril, you say in English? It's our own peril. I mean, to the point that we divorce each other. I don't know, we treat the world, let's say material energy, with, and many times this happens in the name of religion, unfortunately, and they justify with sacred scripture, though it's a misunderstanding of it. Like, okay, the world is profane. God is utterly transcendent and is absolutely beyond this earthly realm. So this world is an obstacle, and therefore we have to get rid of it or transcend or leave this place as soon as possible, whatever doctrine one embraces. And then we have the ecological crisis we have nowadays as a result of a disjointed, dualistic approach toward material energy. And you apply the same toward each other, toward how we relate to God itself. So yeah, we have a great potential, and I speak about that in chapter 3 of the book. We have, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur will say, the soul has volcanic energy for better and for worse, right? So we have a very powerful potential to create beautiful, brighter horizons and prospects and healing. And I assume all of us have had a glimpse of that. But also we have that same potential directed in a misdirected without proper guidance and education can create so much division. So, and we can create so many obstacles. Again, we can see the world as an obstacle, and the world is not an obstacle. So seeing the world as an obstacle is in itself an obstacle we are creating. And in the same way, we are creating so many false obstacles, which actually are facilitators, which actually are portals. Like the world can be a portal to an experience of the sacred. But we choose to label that as an obstacle. So our labeling of that as such is the obstacle. So I will say that's what gets in the way, right? Our labeling, the main obstacle is that we are seeing the obstacle where it's not. And therefore we miss which is the actual obstacle.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, to me, it speaks of just the nature of evolution itself, that these are thoughts that are ways of being that we're adopting, that we are evolving into new ways of seeing, feeling the necessity to see things the commonality of things, to see the unitive relationship of things. It seems that this again is a call of the world to see this, and then it's the next kind of step of evolutionary thought, to see things more unitively instead of broken up and disjointed, to see the connection in things.
Yeah.
This is what will really help to heal the earth, the planet, the individual.
Yeah, that's how in our tradition wise people are defined, right? As seers. You mentioned Bhakti many times the word see. And in Sanskrit you have all these terms. Rishi means a seer. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita refers to a guru as Tattva Darshin, or a seer of reality. Tattva means reality. Darshan means one who has darshan. No? So one who sees reality for what it is. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's all about seeing, getting the right perspective. That's why, again, we go back to Sambandha Navideya, theory and practice. Getting the proper conceptual orientation gives you a type of lenses, which allows you to an particular experience of seeing. So, and yeah, ultimately the actual seeing is witnessing the interconnectedness of everything. I'm thinking about the verse from the Bhagavad Gita, Vidya Vinaya Sampane, Brahmani Gavihastini Sunichaiva Swapakacha Pandita Samadarshinaha. Krishna is saying a pandit, or an actual scholar, and scholar here, he's not, it's interesting, pandit journalist uses, even beyond India now, in other parts of the world, they use the word pandit to refer to someone who is an expert on some area of knowledge. But Krishna is saying pandita samadarshinaha. Darshina means to see, and sama means equally. And gives the example. A real pandit is someone who sees equally a Brahmin, a cow, right? A dog, a dog eater, the Bhagavad Gita will say, like given different possibilities of people and realities. And he concludes saying, an actual pandit has nothing to do with being erudite in theoretical terms, but having equanimity of vision, being able to see the relationality, the participation, the belongingness, the wholeness of everything as containing one same unified vessel.
Yeah, the belongingness.
Yeah. So I recall Ilya Delio referring to reality as unbroken wholeness. We will say Advai Gyan Tattva, reality is non-dual consciousness. But again, these are just words. We could interchange them and we are still talking about the same thing.
Yeah, and again, it speaks to, the concept of wholeness and Om Purnam, where everything has the DNA, let's say, of God, because everything is coming from him and her and them. So because of the nature of God as being all expansive and ever growing and adventurous and becoming more, then that is also present within all of creation, all of being. So that kind of goes to how you speak of, evolution of God, of soul, of matter, and that connectedness, why all of those things are in evolution, and how evolution itself is in divine love, because it's all connected to that. We are all made of the same kind of stuff.
Yeah, I wanted you to clarify that expression, that sentence in the introduction where you say even evolution is falling in love.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, it has to do with the title, which I know it can be a little bit tricky to understand, Evolution in Divine Love. And I'm already having trouble in thinking, how will I put that into the Spanish version of the book? Because it doesn't make sense in the same way it will make sense in English. Because in
Maharaj,
English,
if I could add one thing, I and this might have something to do with the Spanish or the Latin, because evolution comes from a Latin word. We just looked this up yesterday. It's beautiful. It means the unrolling of a book, the unscrolling of a scroll. That is to evolve something. I thought that when I read that, I thought this is too perfect.
Yeah, the exact words were the unrolling of a book.
Interesting. We have to include that in the second edition. Or you have to write your own book about that and speak about that. But yeah, thank you for sharing. Beautiful. Yeah, again, I love etymology and how the words originally are really pointing out to something generally way deeper to how we tend to use those words casually. So going back to the title, Evolution in Divine Love, yeah, I'd like to make a play of words also in how it's used in English when you say, okay, that person fell in love, right? So instead of saying divine love in evolution, which was another option for the title and many other options, of course, I thought, no, let's speak about evolution in divine love. Like as you fall in love or you fall in divine love, evolution finds itself in a perpetual state of divine love. No? Instead of, I took the other stance. Instead of saying love is in evolution, which of course we can also make that point, love is evolving. Evolution is in love. Evolution has fallen in love, like to create a shift of perspective through the language. I know it may be a little bit unnatural, and for some, like takes a little bit to adjust the brain to see it from that place. But I felt it's worthy enough to the point of naming the book as such. So to conceive the notion of, yeah, however we perceive this principle of evolution, as you mentioned, Bhakti-rasa, whether it is in the nature of love, in the divine, in the potential of the soul, in matter. Again, it's all pointing to a common thread. These different departments are not separate. In our tradition, we will make this point. There's God, to use Sanskrit terminology, Shaktiman and Shakti, the energetic source, and three main energies generally depicted, though unlimited: love, soul, matter. So those are these four realities or departments. Those are the ones included in the title, right? Evolution, divine love, and then the eternal becoming of God, soul, and matter. And so I tried to show how this form through the 4 chapters of the book, which are related to each one of them. First love, then God, then the soul, then matter. How there is a common thread shared by all of them, as you, in your own words, Bhakti-rasa DNA. There is a blueprint, an evolutionary, so to say, blueprint that begins with love, the ultimate reality for us, the goal of life to attain, and an ongoing reality to be attained in an ongoing way for us and even for God, and how that shows itself in love, in God, in us, in matter. So I felt the call to say, okay, evolution has fallen in love, so to say. Also, it's a way of deconstructing the normal understanding of evolution that immediately goes to biological Darwinian evolutionary biology. And okay, I'm addressing that in one part of the book, but let's not just limit the word evolution that, as you properly mentioned, has to do with the unrolling of a text. So it goes way beyond to our daily common understanding of what evolution means. So let's bring evolution back to its original intended meaning as something that is in constant unfolding. And again, for me, that's because evolution has fallen in love. So that takes you to a journey of constant, expansion and becoming.
And because everything is consciousness and ultimately personality, that it's fair to say that evolution falls in love, that it is in love. Evolution itself is the nature, is a consciousness. It's part of God's consciousness. Evolution is a personality, like love is a personality.
Yeah, I absolutely love this switch in the title you made, Evolution in Divine Love versus Divine Love in Evolution, because somehow it feels like evolution is a bigger force acting on all the different things, like including God. So with the switch now, it's like evolution is in love, so evolution itself is influenced by love.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. So whenever we address the notion of evolution in one relation to us, to matter, we can hopefully connect it quickly with the principle of love. So the unfolding and the growth and the expansion is somehow or other connected to love. Though I agree, and I addressed it in my book, it may be at times difficult to understand how evolution can be seen in connection to love, particularly in terms of some expressions of biological evolution, which seem to be deadly or cruel, or so we will address that eventually when that topic comes in the fourth
We're
chapter.
excited. We're excited to go there. There's so much substance here.
It's an ongoing journey. Yeah,
But
I'm
I
sure
think
when we reach the last episode, we will feel we are just warming up now.
I think this is the perfect moment for a pause.
One thing I wanted to mention also from your book and to have you comment on it is in your book after each section, there are many sections. There are 4 chapters,
Mm,
the book, and within these chapters there are several sections. At the end of each section, there's a part where you call pause, where you give contemplative kind of questions and thoughts. So I'm wondering,
Reflection questions.
yeah, yeah, and how do you see this? How does this speak to what the way that you are hoping that the reader will approach the book, or something that they will be able to walk away with? What is the purpose of the pause?
mm. Well, of course, we could ask that same question beyond this book, right? What's the purpose of a pause in life, in silence, for a moment, right? To catch our breath, sleeping, resting, as John is showing. So all that is necessary to integrate, right? To balance, to internalize. So because I can acknowledge that also, and I mentioned that in my book, to speak about things in constant movement and expansion and evolution and becoming, at one point can feel overwhelming, like stop for a moment. I need a plateau. I need to catch my breath. So that's one reason why I include in these pauses is literally to invite the reader to don't jump into the next section, but stop, catch your breath, so you are not overwhelmed by the notion of something in constant movement, and also internalize the content, and also the spirit of the pauses, which I also refer to as contemplative prompts, is to take to embody, as we mentioned before, to not keep that particular section as a mere big bunch of information, but how can I embody that, internalize that, translate that into practice, how I can see this particular information applying in a radically personal, to go to my second book, way to my own life, how this section, which the author didn't wrote thinking about me in particular, but how that speaks to where I am now, here and now in this chapter of my journey. So how to take the abstract generic content and make it radically personal, applicable to concrete reality, relationships. So I've tried to make those pauses as embodied and practically oriented as possible. But again, also giving that moment to stop, catch your breath, reflect, ruminate, internalize. You may need to go back to some of the sections. Again, I wouldn't say it's a book to read as soon as possible. I mean, I will argue any book should be read in this as soon as possible mood, so to say. But
Mm.
every book should, even if it has no official pauses, we should be able to pause very much as the Lectio Divina method in Christianity, right? That you read not only a whole section, but you may read a word or a line that has impacted you. As Thomas Merton will say, he say, stop your reading right there, close your book, and enter into meditation or enter into prayer. Like, reflect about that line, why this is touching me in particular, what else is this telling me? And when you reach the limit of your faculties, resort to prayer, to divine inspiration, and then see how you can translate that into your daily life. So I've tried to make that more overtly clear in my book by inserting those pauses. But I will say that even if those pauses won't be there, hopefully the reader can naturally feel that call and follow that call. So don't wait. Sorry, I'm just to say that don't wait for the next official pause to pause, right? You may need to pause after 2 words, 1 paragraph, and you can create and insert your own pause and your own contemplative prompt.
Good instruction.
When you were speaking, I couldn't help but hear the word when you said information, that information helps to form within. These contemplative prompts help to take an external information and to have an effect on the form of things, not to remain theoretical.
Almost like a gestation period, or, it seems like those contemplative pauses are the work of the deep evolution, as you define it, as this striving of consciousness towards greater complexity, greater relationality, and greater unity.
Integration.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, it's a process. It's an ongoing process. So it needs time to be properly digested, integrated, accommodated. So yeah, the invitation is for the reader, for each of us, to take all the time you need to get everything properly integrated, so we can have proper integrity, right? Which is related to the notion of having properly integrated whenever needs to be integrated.
Yeah, so we are coming up on our hour, and I'm thank you very much for sharing time with us, your thoughts, of course, the book, writing the book, and the furthering of the discussion of the book in this series of podcasts that will be airing. And I'm wondering, to close this episode out, if you have an idea, what would you like the readers to gain from this book? What would you like them to receive from this book?
In a word or in an aphorism.
Okay, I'll make the aphorism first and then a further unpacking of that. A few things come. First of all, before the aphorism, the clarification before the aphorism will be, I don't want to condition what the reader should receive from the book, right? Because I don't want to limit the potential gifts that every single person needs to receive to my saying, I want you to receive this gift from reading my book, because it's my book, quote unquote, but in one sense, it's beyond being my book. So I'm quite aware and humbled by the fact that many of the things put there are not mine, are beyond myself, or coming through oneself. And therefore, the results of that will be beyond my own thinking and expectation. So I will say something, but again, the context that I don't have any expectation or plan. I would like this to be the impact and result in the reader. But actually, what I want is that whatever impact needs to be experienced by each reader in their own unique way, that's what I desire. That's to begin with. But in general, of course, and as I mentioned in the book, at least the main intention of the book is to create an awareness of being in evolution, an awareness that reality is evolving, not only acknowledging there is something called evolution, there is something called process, but living into that, living into a life where reality is an ongoing, hopefully exciting, wonderful, awesome journey, instead of conceiving things from moving from point A to point B and then game over, right? So it's for me trying to hopefully create that awareness and experience that whether we're speaking about love, God, us, the world of matter, everything is moving, dancing, singing, evolving. We need to resort to poetry at one point to start to describe all this. And I think that's really transforming to enter into that type of way of seeing, way of relating, to keep the door open to further disclosure, to perpetual unfolding. That gives so much, for me at least, excitement and hope and possibility for ongoing and endless participation and celebration and belongingness. So yeah, so I will say that with my original caveat that whatever the reader needs to receive as an experience as well.
Oh, beautiful. Whatever that looks like. Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Unconditional.
Yeah, I touch upon that in this book, and the fourth one will be fully about that. Unconditional love. But we talk about that here also. Yeah, love is without conditions, right? It's constantly expanding beyond conditions. So here we are trying to grasp a little bit about that bottomless ocean. So thank you. Thank you so much for you and for the ones listening, watching this conversation, for joining us in this. That I personally also felt important as when I've published Radical Personalism, my second book, we started the Free Radical podcast as for me, it was like a necessary urge. Okay, I finished this book, but I don't want to make this content finish in the book. So let's continue overflowing and spilling the thing in conversation with others. So then the podcast started and continues to this day. So naturally, when this book was finished, it's like, okay, instead of thinking next book is how can we continue the conversation, how can we continue exploring and expanding the book. So here we are in the EDL Evolution Divine Love podcast. So thank you so much for inviting me to be part of that.